Imagine a moment when someone's opinion of you shifts instantly because they associate you with something or someone positive. Perhaps it's wearing a luxury watch, quoting a famous leader, or aligning yourself with a well-respected brand. This is the power of the halo effect, a psychological phenomenon where one favorable trait influences how others perceive everything else about you. By strategically associating yourself with positive attributes, you can shape perceptions, build trust, and even gain influence, all while leveraging the subconscious biases of those around you. The halo effect occurs when an initial impression of someone, based on a single characteristic, colors our overall perception of them. For example, if someone is physically attractive, we might assume they're also intelligent, kind, or trustworthy, even without evidence to support those conclusions. Similarly, if someone associates themselves with prestigious brands, successful people, or admirable qualities, we unconsciously transfer those positive traits onto them. For instance, imagine meeting someone who drives a Tesla, wears designer clothing, and speaks confidently about their work and sustainability. Without realizing it, you might start assuming they're competent, ethical, and innovative, even if you know little about their actual abilities. These assumptions stem from the halo effect, which amplifies our tendency to generalize based on limited information. The key here is association. By deliberately connecting yourself to symbols of success, morality, or expertise, you can harness the halo effect to enhance your reputation. The effectiveness of the halo effect lies in its ability to simplify complex judgments. Human brains are wired to conserve energy, and evaluating every detail about a person requires significant effort. Instead, we rely on shortcuts like associating external markers, e.g. the appearance, affiliations, with internal qualities, e.g. intelligence, reliability. One critical factor is peripheral cues. These are subtle signals that trigger automatic responses. For example, studies show that people rate speakers more favorably if they deliver presentations using high-quality visuals or professional attire. The content itself may remain unchanged, but the context creates a halo of competence. Another element is social conditioning. From a young age, we learn to equate certain traits or possessions with success. Luxury cars, Ivy League degrees, or endorsements from celebrities carry cultural weight, making it easier for individuals to project positive assumptions onto anyone linked to these symbols. The halo effect manifests in countless scenarios, from personal branding to marketing strategies. In workplaces, employees who dress professionally or consistently meet deadlines often earn reputations for being dependable across all tasks, even unrelated ones. Managers exploit this bias by dressing sharply during meetings or highlighting prestigious qualifications to command respect. In advertising, companies frequently use celebrity endorsements to leverage the halo effect. When a famous athlete promotes a product, consumers subconsciously link the athlete's discipline, strength, or charisma to the item itself. Similarly, influencers build careers by associating themselves with aspirational lifestyles, convincing followers to adopt their preferences. Even in social settings, the halo effect plays a role. Imagine hosting a dinner party and serving wine labeled as award-winning. Guests might rave about its taste, even if it's identical to a cheaper bottle. The label acts as a peripheral cue, creating a halo of quality that enhances the experience. At its core, the halo effect exploits our desire for simplicity and consistency. Humans crave coherence in their perceptions. If one aspect of someone seems impressive, it feels logical to extend that judgment to other areas. For example, if a CEO donates generously to charity, we might assume they're also compassionate leaders, even if their management style tells a different story. This tactic also bypasses critical thinking. Because the halo effect operates on emotion, admiration, envy, or aspiration, it sidesteps rational analysis. Few people question why they feel drawn to someone who exudes confidence or aligns with elite brands. Instead, they accept the impression at face value. Imagine a moment when you're faced with an offer that feels fleeting, a chance slipping through your fingers if you don't act immediately. The pressure builds, the clock ticks, and suddenly, rational thought takes a backseat to emotion. This is the power of creating urgency, a psychological tactic designed to bypass careful consideration and trigger impulsive action. By framing opportunities as scarce or time-sensitive, you can nudge people toward decisions they might otherwise hesitate to make. Creating urgency involves using phrases, tactics, or scenarios that suggest limited availability or impending loss. Whether it's a countdown timer on a website, a last chance sale, or a warning that supplies are running low, the goal is simple: to provoke a sense of immediacy that overrides deliberate decision-making. For example, imagine receiving an email that says, "Only 2 hours left to claim your exclusive discount." Even if you weren't planning to buy anything, the ticking clock creates a subconscious push to act now rather than risk missing out. Similarly, real estate agents might emphasize that multiple offers are coming in for a house, urging buyers to decide quickly before someone else secures the deal. The key here is scarcity, whether real or manufactured. When something feels rare or fleeting, its perceived value skyrockets, making us more likely to act impulsively. The effectiveness of creating urgency is in its ability to exploit several well-documented biases and emotional triggers. One critical factor is loss aversion, which we explored earlier. The idea that humans fear losing something far more than they value gaining it. When presented with a potential loss, e.g., missing out on a great deal, people are more motivated to take immediate action. Another element is time pressure. Studies show that when deadlines loom, our brains shift from analytical thinking to reactive mode. Instead of weighing pros and cons, we focus on avoiding regret or disappointment. For instance, shoppers who see limited stock available labels are more likely to purchase items without researching alternatives or comparing prices. Finally, there's social proof. Urgency often comes packaged with cues that others are already taking advantage of the opportunity. Phrases like, "join thousands of happy customers," or "this product is selling fast," amplify the fear of being left behind, further accelerating decision-making. Creating urgency manifests in countless scenarios, from marketing campaigns to personal negotiations. Retailers frequently use flash sales, limited edition products, or exclusive bonuses to drive purchases. Online platforms add visual cues like "only 3 left in stock," or 9 other shoppers are viewing this item, subtly pressuring consumers to commit. In workplaces, managers might create urgency to motivate teams. For instance, announcing a tight deadline for submitting project proposals can encourage employees to prioritize tasks and avoid delays. Similarly, event organizers might send reminders like, "tickets selling out fast, reserve yours today," to boost attendance. Even in personal relationships, urgency plays a role. Imagine trying to convince a friend to join you for an outing, saying, "we need to leave in 10 minutes or we'll miss the start," creates a sense of necessity that leaves little room for hesitation. The implied consequence drives quicker agreement. At its core, creating urgency exploits our instinctual responses to threats and rewards. Human evolution favored those who acted swiftly in uncertain situations. Waiting too long could mean missing food, shelter, or safety. Today, while the stakes may be lower, the same instincts remain. We react strongly to signals of scarcity or impending loss. This tactic also bypasses critical thinking. Unlike appeals to reason, which require careful evaluation, urgency operates on emotion, fear, excitement, or even guilt. Few people stop to question why they feel compelled to act immediately. Instead, they respond instinctively to prevent harm or secure gain. The foot in the door technique is a psychological strategy designed to increase compliance by starting small. The idea is simple. If you can get someone to agree to a minor request, they're far more likely to say yes to a larger one later on. This principle relies on our innate desire for consistency. Once we commit to something, no matter how trivial, we feel compelled to align our future actions with that initial decision. For example, imagine someone asked you to sign a petition supporting environmental causes. It's a small act, hardly demanding any effort. A week later, the same person approaches you again, at this time asking for a donation to the cause. Because you've already identified as someone who supports the environment, even through a simple signature, you're more inclined to agree to the larger request. This technique works because humans have an inherent need to see themselves as consistent individuals. Once we take a stand or make a choice, we want to maintain that image, even if it means escalating our involvement beyond what we initially intended. Research has shown just how potent this approach can be. One famous study conducted in the Testes demonstrated the power of the foot-in-the-door technique. Participants were first asked to display a small sign promoting safe driving in their homes, a relatively harmless request. Later, these same individuals were far more likely to agree to place a large, unsightly billboard advocating safe driving in their front yards compared to those who hadn't been approached with the initial request. Why does this happen? Psychologists believe it's rooted in self-perception theory. When we comply with a small request, we begin to see ourselves as the kind of person who agrees to such things. Over time, this perception influences our behavior, making us more susceptible to saying yes to increasingly significant demands. It's not just about convincing others, it's about reshaping how people view themselves. And once that shift occurs, the possibilities for influence expand dramatically. The foot in the door technique isn't confined to academic studies. It permeates everyday life. Think about subscription services offering free trials. By agreeing to a low-stakes trial period, you're more likely to continue paying once the trial ends. Similarly, charities often start by asking for a small contribution before scaling up their appeals for larger donations. Cult leaders have historically exploited this tactic to recruit followers. They begin by inviting potential members to casual gatherings or workshops, low-commitment events that seem harmless enough. As attendees grow comfortable and identify with the group, they become more willing to dedicate increasing amounts of time, money, and loyalty. Even in personal relationships, the foot-in-the-door technique plays out subtly. Ever noticed how friends might ask for small favors, like borrowing a book or helping move furniture, and gradually escalate to bigger asks? Each agreement reinforces their ability to rely on you, creating a pattern of compliance that feels natural but is actually carefully orchestrated. At its core, the foot-in-the-door technique exploits two key aspects of human psychology: consistency bias and cognitive dissonance. Consistency bias drives us to act in ways that match our previous behaviors, while cognitive dissonance compels us to resolve conflicting thoughts. If we've already said yes to a small request, refusing a subsequent one creates discomfort, an internal conflict we instinctively seek to avoid. Moreover, the technique bypasses our critical thinking. The initial request is so minor that it doesn't trigger resistance. By the time the larger request comes along, our guard is down, and we've already subconsciously aligned ourselves with the requester's agenda. Imagine yourself now standing at the threshold of decision-making, feeling the weight of countless tiny agreements stacking up around you. Let the rhythm of the foot-in-the-door technique guide you deeper into relaxation, cradled by the knowledge that every small step shapes the path ahead. And now, let this exploration of psychological influence carry you toward restful slumber, wrapped in the embrace of a world where understanding the mind's tricks brings clarity and calm. The door-in-the-face technique operates on the principle of reciprocity. The idea that when someone makes a concession, we feel compelled to reciprocate. Here's how it works. You start by making an exaggerated or unreasonable request, knowing full well that the person will likely refuse. Then you back off and present your actual, more reasonable request, because the second request seems far less demanding in comparison. The other person is much more likely to agree. For example, imagine a charity fundraiser approaches you with this pitch. Can you donate $500 to support our cause? Most people would immediately decline such a large sum. But then the fundraiser follows up with, okay, how about just 20? Suddenly, 20 seems manageable, even generous, compared to their original request. And because the fundraiser has shown flexibility, by lowering their request, you're more inclined to say yes. This technique taps into our natural inclination to cooperate and find middle ground. By rejecting the first request, we subconsciously feel responsible for meeting the requester halfway when they adjust their expectations. The effectiveness of the door-in-the-face technique has been studied extensively in social psychology. One classic experiment demonstrated its power by having participants first asked to volunteer for 2 years at a juvenile detention center, an extreme commitment most would decline. When the researcher then asked if they'd be willing to chaperone a single trip to the zoo, compliance rates skyrocketed compared to groups who were only asked to help with the zoo trip up front. Why does this happen? Psychologists attribute it to 2 key factors: contrast effect and reciprocal concessions. The contrast effect refers to how the second request appears smaller and more reasonable after being juxtaposed with the first, inflated one. Meanwhile, reciprocal concessions play on our instinct to reciprocate goodwill. When someone meets us halfway, we feel obligated to do the same. It's not manipulation, it's human nature. We're hardwired to respond positively to compromise, especially when it feels like a fair exchange. The door-in-the-face technique isn't confined to academic studies, it permeates everyday interactions. Think about car dealerships, where salespeople often start negotiations with an inflated price before gradually lowering it. This creates the illusion of a deal, making customers more likely to agree to the final offer. Parents use this strategy all the time without realizing it. For instance, a child might ask to stay out until midnight. Knowing this is excessive, the parent counters with, "How about 10 p.m. instead?" The child agrees, feeling victorious, despite the curfew still aligning with the parent's original goal. Even in personal relationships, the door-in-the-face technique plays out subtly. Ever noticed how colleagues or friends might propose an ambitious project timeline, only to scale it back when met with resistance? Each agreement reinforces their ability to negotiate effectively, creating a pattern of cooperation that feels natural but is actually carefully orchestrated. At its core, the door-in-the-face technique exploits 2 key aspects of human psychology: perception of fairness and guilt avoidance. When faced with an unreasonable request, refusing it feels justified. However, once the requester concedes and lowers their expectations, declining again triggers a sense of guilt. We begin to question whether we're being too harsh or uncooperative. Moreover, the technique bypasses our critical thinking. The initial request is so extreme that it sets a new baseline for negotiation. By the time the second request comes along, our guard is down, and we've already subconsciously aligned ourselves with the requester's agenda. Imagine yourself now standing at the threshold of decision-making, feeling the weight of countless rejections and concessions shaping your responses. Let the rhythm of the door-in-the-face technique guide you deeper into relaxation, cradled by the knowledge that every small step shapes the path ahead. And now, let this exploration of psychological influence carry you toward restful slumber, wrapped in the embrace of a world where understanding the mind's tricks brings clarity and calm. Imagine sitting across from someone, feeling an unspoken connection, as if the two of you are perfectly in sync. This isn't just chance. It's the power of mirroring, a psychological technique that builds trust, rapport, and compliance without saying a word. By subtly mimicking another person's body language, you can create a subconscious bond that makes them more open to your ideas or requests. Mirroring is the act of subtly imitating another person's gestures, posture, facial expressions, or even speech patterns. When done correctly, it creates a sense of familiarity and comfort, as though you're speaking the same nonverbal language. Our brains are wired to respond positively to similarity. When we see ourselves reflected in others, we instinctively feel safer and more connected. For example, picture yourself in a coffee shop chatting with a friend. If you lean back in your chair and cross your legs and your friend unconsciously does the same moments later, you've both engaged in mirroring. Neither of you may realize it, but this synchronization strengthens your bond and enhances communication. In fact, studies show that people who mirror each other tend to like each other more and cooperate more effectively. The key here is subtlety. Obvious mimicry can come across as mocking or insincere, which breaks rapport instead of building it. True mirroring happens naturally, or appears to, because it aligns with the rhythm of the conversation. The effectiveness of mirroring lies in its ability to tap into our primal need for belonging. Neuroscientists point to mirror neurons, specialized cells in the brain that activate both when we perform an action and when we observe someone else doing the same thing. These neurons help us empathize with others, making mirroring a powerful tool for fostering understanding and trust. One study, conducted by psychologists, found that waiters who mirrored their customers' body language received higher tips than those who didn't. Similarly, salespeople trained in mirroring techniques closed deals more frequently because clients felt understood and respected. Even therapists use mirroring to build therapeutic alliances, helping patients feel heard and validated during sessions. Mirroring doesn't just work one way. It's reciprocal. When you mirror someone, they often begin mirroring you back without realizing it. This creates a feedback loop of mutual imitation, reinforcing the connection between you and deepening the sense of rapport. Mirroring has countless applications in everyday life. Think about job interviews. Candidates who subtly match their interviewer's tone of voice or posture are often perceived as more likable and competent. Leaders use mirroring to inspire loyalty and cooperation among team members, while negotiators employ it to diffuse tension and find common ground. Even romantic relationships benefit from mirroring. Couples who naturally synchronize their movements, like holding hands or walking in step, are shown to report higher levels of satisfaction. On the flip side, mismatched nonverbal cues, such as crossed arms or avoiding eye contact, can signal disengagement and lead to misunderstandings. Parents also use mirroring instinctively with children. A parent might crouch down to a child's level, adopting a playful tone or mimicking their excitement over a toy. This not only helps the child feel seen and valued, but also encourages better behavior and communication. At its core, mirroring taps into our innate desire for harmony and acceptance. Humans are social creatures, and we thrive on connections that make us feel understood. When someone mirrors us, it sends a silent message. I'm like you. We're on the same team. Moreover, mirroring bypasses conscious awareness. Because it operates on a subconscious level, the person being mirrored rarely attributes their positive feelings directly to the mimicry. Instead, they simply experience a vague yet undeniable sense of rapport, an intangible quality that draws them closer. Imagine yourself now engaging in a meaningful conversation, feeling the subtle alignment of gestures and expressions creating an invisible thread between you and the other person. Let the rhythm of mirroring guide you deeper into relaxation, cradled by the knowledge that even the smallest actions can forge powerful bonds. And now, let this exploration of psychological influence carry you toward restful slumber, wrapped in the embrace of a world where understanding the mind's tricks brings clarity and calm. Imagine a moment when someone appears unsure, clumsy, or overwhelmed. Their struggle seems genuine, evoking an instinctive desire in you to help, to step in and ease their burden. This is the subtle art of pretending to be incompetent, a psychological tactic that leverages vulnerability to elicit sympathy and assistance from others. By feigning inability, confusion, or even failure, we can subtly shift responsibility onto those around us while gaining support without appearing manipulative. Pretending to be incompetent involves deliberately acting less capable than you truly are in order to gain help, attention, or leniency from others. Whether it's fumbling with technology during a meeting, claiming ignorance about a task, or exaggerating difficulty with everyday responsibilities, the goal is simple: to prompt others to offer assistance or take over entirely. For example, imagine someone struggling to carry groceries into their house. They drop a bag intentionally, or at least make it look accidental, and sigh dramatically. A neighbor passing by might rush over to lend a hand, motivated by empathy and a sense of duty. Similarly, a colleague who pretends they don't know how to use a new software program may find themselves relieved of the task altogether as coworkers jump in to help. The key here is subtlety. Overdone incompetence can come across as insincere or lazy, but a well-timed display of fragility can be disarmingly effective. The psychology behind pretended incompetence, the effectiveness of pretending to be incompetent, lies in its ability to trigger caregiving instincts and social norms. Humans are naturally inclined to assist those in need. It's part of our evolutionary wiring. When someone appears vulnerable, we feel compelled to step in, whether out of kindness, obligation, or a subconscious desire to maintain group harmony. One critical factor is reciprocity. People instinctively respond to perceived generosity by wanting to give back. If someone presents themselves as needing help, others often interpret it as an opportunity to demonstrate their value or reliability. For instance, if a friend repeatedly claims they're terrible at cooking, another person might volunteer to take charge of meals, not realizing they've been subtly nudged into the role. Another element is social proof. We tend to mirror behaviors and attitudes within our environment. If one person acts helpless, others may assume it's appropriate or expected to provide aid, reinforcing the dynamic. Additionally, people dislike seeing inefficiency. Helping someone fix their problem restores balance and reduces discomfort. Pretending to be incompetent manifests in countless scenarios, from personal relationships to professional settings. In households, one partner might pretend not to understand how to load the dishwasher correctly, prompting the other to handle it regularly. Over time, this creates a pattern where specific roles become entrenched, whether intentionally or not. In workplaces, employees sometimes use this tactic to avoid undesirable tasks. For example, a team member might claim they're hopeless with data entry, leading colleagues to divide the work among themselves rather than risk errors. Supervisors, too, might feign confusion about technical details to encourage subordinates to take initiative, shifting accountability while maintaining authority. Even children master this technique early on. A child who pretends not to know how to tie their shoes might be seeking extra attention or avoiding independence. Adults, charmed by their apparent innocence, are more likely to assist or at least soften their expectations. At its core, pretending to be incompetent exploits our deep-seated need for connection and meaning. When someone appears vulnerable, we see them as authentic and unguarded, qualities that foster intimacy and trust. Moreover, vulnerability shifts focus away from flaws or intentions, redirecting attention toward shared humanity. This technique also bypasses critical thinking. Unlike direct persuasion, which requires logic and reasoning, pretended incompetence operates on emotion, sympathy, guilt, or even frustration. Few people question why they feel obligated to help someone who seems genuinely stuck. They simply act on it. Imagine yourself now engaging in a conversation, carefully crafting moments of feigned uncertainty to draw others closer. Let the rhythm of pretended incompetence guide you deeper into relaxation, cradled by the knowledge that even small acts of perceived weakness can foster profound connections. Imagine a moment when someone reveals their struggles or insecurities to you. There's an instant shift in the atmosphere. They seem more relatable, less threatening, and perhaps even trustworthy. This is the power of feigning vulnerability, a subtle yet potent psychological tactic that disarms suspicion and lowers defenses. By appearing open and exposed, we invite others to let down their guard, creating opportunities for connection or influence. Feigning vulnerability involves deliberately presenting oneself as weaker, uncertain, or more fragile than one truly is. It's a strategic act designed to evoke empathy, compassion, or a protective instinct in others. Whether it's admitting a supposed flaw, sharing a fabricated hardship, or simply appearing unsure, the goal is to create a sense of safety and openness in the other person. For example, imagine a colleague who confesses they're struggling with public speaking before a big presentation. They might say something like, "I'm really nervous about this. I've never been good at presentations." Even if they're secretly confident, this admission makes them appeal approachable and human. Others are likely to respond with encouragement or support, lowering their own emotional barriers in the process. The key here is authenticity, or at least the appearance of it. Overdone vulnerability can come across as insincere, but a well-timed display of fragility can be disarmingly effective. The effectiveness of feigning vulnerability lies in its ability to trigger our innate caregiving instincts. Humans are wired to respond to signs of distress. When someone appears vulnerable, we often feel compelled to help or protect them. This reaction stems from evolutionary biology. Our survival depended on cooperation and mutual aid within groups. Additionally, vulnerability disrupts power dynamics. When someone shows weakness, they signal that they're not a threat, which encourages others to relax. For instance, leaders who occasionally admit mistakes or share personal challenges are often perceived as more relatable and trustworthy. Their vulnerability creates a bridge between themselves and their audience, fostering loyalty and goodwill. Feigning vulnerability also exploits reciprocity. When someone shares something intimate or difficult, we often feel inclined to reciprocate by opening up ourselves. This exchange deepens the bond and creates a sense of mutual understanding, even if one side isn't being entirely truthful. Feigning vulnerability manifests in various contexts, both personal and professional. In negotiations, for example, a party might pretend to be uncertain or overwhelmed to gain sympathy and concessions. A salesperson could claim they're new to the role or unfamiliar with certain processes, prompting customers to offer assistance or patience instead of skepticism. In romantic relationships, this tactic can manifest as playful self-deprecation. One partner might joke about their clumsiness or lack of cooking skills, encouraging the other to step in and take charge. Over time, these dynamics can solidify roles within the relationship, whether intentionally or not. Even in competitive environments, such as sports or business, individuals may use vulnerability to throw opponents off balance. A chess player might feign hesitation over a move, making their opponent underestimate them. Similarly, a job candidate might mention a minor weakness during an interview to appear honest and self-aware, increasing their chances of being hired. At its core, feigning vulnerability taps into our desire for connection and meaning. When someone appears vulnerable, we see them as authentic and unguarded, qualities that foster intimacy and trust. Moreover, vulnerability shifts focus away from flaws or intentions, redirecting attention towards shared humanity. However, the technique isn't without risks. If discovered, feigned vulnerability can damage credibility and erode trust. Authenticity matters deeply in relationships, and false displays of fragility can backfire if perceived as manipulative. The line between genuine and strategic vulnerability is thin, and crossing it requires careful judgment. Imagine yourself now engaging in a conversation, subtly revealing a challenge you're facing. Feel the weight of another person stepping forward to offer their support, drawn in by your apparent openness. Let the rhythm of feigned vulnerability guide you deeper into relaxation, cradled by the knowledge that even small acts of perceived exposure can foster profound connections. And now, let this exploration of psychological influence carry you toward restful slumber, wrapped in the embrace of a world where understanding the mind's tricks brings clarity and calm. Imagine a conversation where the direction is subtly controlled without ever giving the other person a chance to fully explain themselves. This is the power of loaded questions, a psychological tactic that embeds assumptions into seemingly innocent inquiries. By framing questions in ways that presuppose guilt, agreement, or specific outcomes, you can steer conversations toward conclusions that serve your purpose, whether it's gaining compliance, disarming resistance, or simply manipulating the narrative. A loaded question is one that contains an embedded assumption, making it difficult for the respondent to answer without accepting, or at least addressing, the premise of the question. These questions bypass logical reasoning by forcing the listener to engage with the underlying bias, often leading them down a path they didn't intend to follow. For example, consider the question, when did you stop lying? The very structure of the question assumes two things. First, that the person has lied in the past. Second, that they have since stopped. Regardless of their actual behavior, answering the question requires grappling with these preconditions, which shifts the focus away from denial and onto defending actions within the frame set by the questioner. While loaded questions may seem confrontational, they can also be used tactfully in persuasion or negotiation. For instance, asking someone, "How much do you love supporting local businesses?" subtly implies that they do support such initiatives, nudging them closer to aligning with that identity. The effectiveness of loaded questions lies in their ability to exploit cognitive biases and social norms. One key mechanism is the confirmation bias, where people unconsciously seek information that confirms existing belief. When presented with a loaded question, individuals often respond in ways that reinforce the implied assumption rather than challenging it. Another factor is the framing effect. How a question is framed significantly influences how it's perceived and answered. Loaded questions cleverly frame situations in a way that limits responses to those favorable to the questioner. For example, asking, "Why do you think environmental policies are essential?" presumes agreement with the importance of such policies, making disagreement feel awkward or defensive. Additionally, loaded questions tap into our instinct to avoid conflict. Most people dislike being put on the spot or appearing unreasonable. As a result, they're more likely to go along with the premise of the question rather than risk confrontation by pointing out its flaws. Loaded questions appear everywhere, from everyday conversations to high-stakes negotiations. In legal settings, attorneys use them to trip up witnesses during cross-examination. A classic courtroom example might be, "Have you finally stopped stealing?" from your employer. No matter how the witness answers, the implication of theft remains embedded in the response. In personal relationships, loaded questions can shape perceptions and behaviors. Imagine a partner saying, "Why don't you care about spending time with me anymore?" The accusation, hidden within the question, forces the recipient to defend their commitment rather than questioning the validity of the claim itself. Salespeople frequently employ loaded questions to guide potential customers toward purchases. Phrases like, "Which feature do you think will benefit you most?" assume the product is already desirable, leaving little room for outright rejection. Similarly, marketers craft advertisements around loaded language. "Aren't you tired of overpaying for subpar service?" At their core, loaded questions work because they hijack the brain's natural tendency to prioritize efficiency over accuracy. Instead of critically analyzing the question, listeners instinctively focus on responding, inadvertently validating the embedded assumption. This technique also exploits social dynamics. People generally strive to maintain harmony in interactions, especially when stakes are low. Challenging a loaded question feels unnecessarily combative. So many opt to play along, even if it means conceding ground they wouldn't otherwise give. Imagine yourself now engaging in a conversation, carefully crafting each question to nudge the discussion in your desired direction. Let the rhythm of loaded questions guide you deeper into relaxation, cradled by the knowledge that even small shifts in phrasing can dramatically alter the course of communication. And now, let this exploration of psychological influence carry you toward restful slumber, wrapped in the embrace of a world where understanding the mind's tricks brings clarity and calm. Imagine a moment when someone unexpectedly gives you a small gift or favor. Perhaps it's a warm smile, a thoughtful compliment, or even something as simple as holding the door open for a chew. That subtle act of kindness creates an unspoken quantity of a sense that you owe them something in return. This is the principle of reciprocity, one of the most powerful tools in human interaction. By giving first, we can trigger a deep-seated instinct to repay the gesture, often far beyond its original value. Reciprocity is a social norm deeply embedded in human behavior. It refers to the natural tendency to return favors or repay kindness, whether it's a tangible gift, a service, or even just positive attention. When someone does something nice for us, we feel a subconscious obligation to reciprocate, not because we're forced to, but because it aligns with our innate desire to maintain fairness and balance in relationships. For example, imagine receiving a free sample of a product at a store. Though the item may be worth only a few cents, you might suddenly feel inclined to buy the full-size version, or at least consider it more seriously. Why? Because the act of giving, no matter how small, triggers a psychological response. They gave me something, I should give back. This principle works across cultures and contexts, from personal relationships to marketing strategies. It's why charities send personalized address labels or pens along with their donation requests. It's not just about goodwill. It's about creating a sense of obligation. The effectiveness of reciprocity lies in its evolutionary roots. Early humans relied on cooperation and mutual aid to survive. Those who failed to reciprocate risked being ostracized from their communities, leaving them vulnerable to danger. Over time, this dynamic became ingrained in our psychology, making reciprocity almost reflexive. Studies have shown just how potent this principle is. In one famous experiment, sociologist Philip Koons sent Christmas cards to strangers. Despite having no prior connection, many recipients responded by sending cards back, and some even included heartfelt notes. These people didn't know Koons, yet they felt compelled to reciprocate his initial gesture. Reflective pause. Interestingly, reciprocity doesn't require equal exchange. A minor favor can inspire disproportionately large returns. For instance, offering someone a cup of coffee could lead them to agree to a much larger request later on, simply because they feel indebted to you. Reciprocity manifests in countless ways throughout daily life. Think about networking events. Handing out business cards isn't always enough. Instead, professionals often go a step further by offering helpful advice, sharing resources, or introducing contacts. These small gestures foster goodwill and make others more likely to assist them in the future. In romantic relationships, reciprocity plays out subtly but powerfully. One partner might cook dinner, while the other cleans up afterward. Neither keeps score explicitly, but both understand the implicit agreement to contribute equally. When one person consistently gives without receiving, resentment can build, highlighting how crucial reciprocity is to maintaining harmony. Even marketers exploit reciprocity to drive sales. Loyalty programs, free trials, and promotional discounts all rely on the idea that customers will feel obligated to repay the company by making a purchase. Similarly, waitstaff who leave a mint with the bill often receive higher tips, an example of how tiny tokens of appreciation can yield significant results. At its core, reciprocity taps into our need for social cohesion and trust. Humans thrive on interconnectedness, and reciprocity reinforces those bonds. When someone gives us something, we perceive them as generous and trustworthy, which lowers our defenses and makes us more receptive to their influence. Moreover, reciprocity bypasses critical thinking. Unlike direct persuasion, which requires logic and reasoning, reciprocity operates on emotion and instinct. We rarely question why we feel obligated to repay a favor. We simply act on it. This makes it a highly effective tactic for gaining compliance or building rapport. Imagine yourself now engaging in a meaningful interaction, feeling the weight of a small favor or gift creating an invisible thread between you and another person. Let the rhythm of reciprocity guide you deeper into relaxation, cradled by the knowledge that even the smallest acts of generosity can foster profound connections. And now, let this exploration of psychological influence carry you toward restful slumber, wrapped in the embrace of a world where understanding the mind's tricks brings clarity and calm. Imagine a situation where someone questions your version of events, insisting that what you remember or perceive isn't real. Over time, this subtle undermining chips away at your confidence, leaving you unsure of your own mind. This is gaslighting, a psychological tactic designed to make someone doubt their memory, perception, or sanity. It's a method so insidious It can erode trust in oneself and create dependency on the manipulator. Gaslighting is a form of emotional manipulation where one person deliberately distorts reality to confuse or destabilize another. Named after the 1944 film Gaslight, in which a husband manipulates his wife into believing she's losing her mind, the term has since become synonymous with psychological control. By denying facts, twisting truths, or outright lying, the gaslighter sows seeds of self-doubt in their target. For example, imagine telling a friend about an argument they had with you. They might respond with phrases like, "That never happened," "You're imagining things," or "You always exaggerate." At first, these denials may seem harmless, but over time, they accumulate, making you question whether you're misremembering or misunderstanding events. The goal of gaslighting isn't just to deceive, it's to gain power. By convincing someone they can't trust their judgment, the gaslighter positions themselves as the ultimate authority on reality. The effectiveness of gaslighting lies in its ability to exploit cognitive biases and social vulnerabilities. One key mechanism is cognitive dissonance, the mental discomfort caused by conflicting beliefs or information. When someone insists something didn't happen the way you remember it, your brain struggles to reconcile the discrepancy. To ease this tension, you might start doubting yourself, leaning toward the simpler explanation offered by the gaslighter. Another factor is the authority bias. People are more likely to believe those perceived as knowledgeable or trustworthy. If the gaslighter holds a position of influence, such as a partner, parent, or boss, their claims carry extra weight, further undermining your confidence. Over time, repeated exposure to gaslighting can lead to learned helplessness, where the victim stops trying to assert their perspective. They begin relying on the gaslighter to interpret reality, creating a dangerous imbalance of power. Gaslighting manifests in various contexts, from personal relationships to professional environments. In romantic partnerships, a controlling partner might use gaslighting to isolate their significant other, dismissing concerns like, "You're too sensitive," or "No one else would put up with you." These remarks chip away at the victim's self-esteem, making them feel dependent on the abuser. In workplaces, gaslighting often occurs between supervisors and employees. A manager might deny giving specific instructions, blame mistakes on the employee, or dismiss valid complaints as oversensitivity. This not only undermines the employee's credibility, but also discourages them from speaking out against unfair treatment. Even in politics, gaslighting tactics have been used to manipulate public opinion. Leaders who deny evidence, spread misinformation, or rewrite history exploit collective uncertainty, weakening societal trust in institutions and media. At its core, gaslighting exploits our deep-seated need for certainty and validation. Humans crave coherence. When faced with conflicting narratives, we instinctively seek clarity. Gaslighters capitalize on this by presenting themselves as stable anchors amidst chaos, forcing their targets to rely on them for truth. Moreover, gaslighting bypasses logical reasoning because it operates on emotion, fear, insecurity, confusion. It sidesteps critical analysis. Victims often don't realize they're being manipulated until long after the damage is done. Imagine yourself now engaging in a conversation, feeling the weight of someone questioning your reality. Let the rhythm of gaslighting guide you deeper into relaxation, cradled by the knowledge that awareness is the first step toward reclaiming agency. Understanding the mechanics of manipulation empowers us to recognize and resist its effects. And now, let this exploration of psychological influence carry you toward restful slumber, wrapped in the embrace of a world where understanding the mind's tricks brings clarity and calm. Imagine a negotiation where both parties walk away feeling like winners, even though one side clearly benefits more than the other. This is the power of framing arguments as win-win scenarios, a psychological tactic that reframes self-serving proposals into mutually beneficial solutions. By presenting your goals as aligned with the other person's interests, you can secure agreement without revealing the true imbalance of advantage. Framing an argument as a win-win scenario involves presenting your desired outcome in a way that highlights shared benefits, even if the advantages are disproportionately skewed toward you. Instead of focusing solely on what you gain, you emphasize how the decision or action will also serve the other party's needs, or at least align with their values. For example, imagine you're asking for a raise at work. Rather than simply stating, "I deserve more money because I've been here for 3 years," you could frame it as, "Investing in my role by adjusting my compensation will allow me to take on bigger projects, which will help the team achieve its goals faster." Here, the focus shifts from personal gain to collective success, making the request harder to deny. The key is subtlety. A well-framed argument doesn't outright conceal the imbalance, but instead redirects attention to the perceived mutual benefit, creating a sense of harmony rather than conflict. The effectiveness of this tactic lies in its ability to tap into our innate desire for fairness and cooperation. Humans are naturally inclined to seek out agreements that feel equitable and mutually rewarding. When someone believes they're part of a win-win situation, they're less likely to scrutinize the details or resist the proposal. One critical factor is loss aversion, the principle that people fear losing something far more than they value gaining it. By framing your argument as a way to avoid potential losses, "If we don't act now, we might miss this opportunity," you trigger a stronger emotional response than simply highlighting gains. Another element is social proof. People are more likely to agree to something if they believe others have benefited similarly. For instance, saying many employees who negotiate their salaries see long-term career growth subtly implies that agreeing to your terms is not only reasonable, but expected. Win-win framing appears in various contexts, from business deals to personal relationships. In sales, for example, a car dealership might offer a limited-time discount while emphasizing how much money you'll save over time through lower maintenance costs. While the primary goal is to close the sale, the customer feels reassured that they're getting a good deal. In romantic relationships, this tactic can manifest during discussions about household chores. Instead of demanding, "You need to clean the kitchen every night," you might say, "If we split tasks evenly, we'll both have more free time to relax together." The underlying request remains the same, but the reframing makes it sound collaborative rather than confrontational. Even policymakers use win-win framing to push agendas. For instance, a government might propose a tax increase by arguing this investment in infrastructure will create jobs and improve quality of life for everyone. While the immediate impact may burden taxpayers, the promise of future benefits softens resistance. At its core, win-win framing exploits our tendency to prioritize narratives over facts. When presented with a compelling story that promises mutual benefit, we often overlook discrepancies in logic or fairness. Our brains prefer simplicity and coherence. So we accept the narrative without delving too deeply into its implications. This technique also leverages trust. If the person making the argument seems credible and sincere, we're more likely to buy into their version of events. Additionally, framing arguments as win-win reduces cognitive dissonance, the mental discomfort caused by conflicting beliefs or desires. If we believe we're gaining something valuable, we're less likely to question whether the trade-off is truly balanced. Imagine yourself now engaging in a conversation, carefully crafting each point to highlight the shared benefits. Let the rhythm of win-win framing guide you deeper into relaxation, cradled by the knowledge that even the most lopsided outcomes can be made to feel harmonious when presented thoughtfully. And now, let this exploration of psychological influence carry you toward restful slumber, wrapped in the embrace of a world where understanding the mind's tricks brings clarity and calm. Imagine a moment when someone feigns confusion or ignorance to sidestep blame or responsibility with a shrug of the shoulders, a puzzled expression, or an innocent "I didn't know." They manage to deflect accountability entirely. This is playing dumb, a psychological tactic as old as time itself. By pretending not to understand, remember, or even notice, people can avoid consequences, shift burdens onto others, or simply escape uncomfortable situations. Playing dumb involves intentionally acting uninformed, confused, or oblivious to avoid taking responsibility for something. Whether it's forgetting a deadline, claiming ignorance about rules, or pretending not to hear a request, the goal is simple: create plausible deniability. By appearing incapable or unaware, the person shifts focus away from their actions or inactions and places the burden elsewhere. For example, imagine being asked why you missed an important meeting. Instead of admitting you forgot, you might say, "Oh, was that today? I thought it was tomorrow." Or perhaps you're confronted about failing to complete a task. Your response could be, "I didn't realize it was my job. I must have misunderstood." These responses aren't outright lies, but they're carefully crafted to make you seem less culpable. The beauty of playing dumb lies in its subtlety. Unlike direct denial, which can provoke suspicion, feigned ignorance often goes unchallenged because it's easier to accept than confrontation. After all, who wants to argue with someone who claims they simply didn't know? The effectiveness of playing dumb stems from several key principles of human psychology. First, there's cognitive ease. The brain prefers straightforward explanations over complex ones. When someone says, "I didn't know," it provides a simple resolution to the issue, sparing others the effort of digging deeper. Second, playing dumb exploits our natural aversion to conflict. Confronting someone requires energy and emotional investment. If the person appears genuinely clueless, it feels almost cruel to press further. As a result, many people let the matter drop, preferring harmony over persistence. Finally, playing dumb taps into the halo effect. People tend to assume that those who appear harmless or naive are trustworthy. By projecting innocence, the individual reinforces the perception that they couldn't possibly be at fault, even if evidence suggests otherwise. Playing dumb manifests in countless scenarios, from personal relationships to professional environments. In workplaces, employees may use this tactic to evade extra work. For instance, a team member might claim they forgot to check their email, thereby avoiding a tedious assignment. Supervisors, too, sometimes play dumb to dodge accountability, saying things like, "I wasn't aware of the policy changes," to justify inaction. In romantic relationships, playing dumb often takes the form of passive resistance. One partner might pretend not to notice household chores piling up, subtly signaling dissatisfaction without addressing the issue directly. Over time, this dynamic can lead to resentment, but it also allows the person to avoid uncomfortable conversations. Even children master this technique early on. A child caught misbehaving might widen their eyes and say, "I didn't know that was wrong." Adults, charmed by their apparent innocence, are more likely to forgive, or at least soften their reprimand. At its core, playing dumb works because it preys on our desire for simplicity and fairness. Humans instinctively seek order and clarity, and accepting someone's claim of ignorance restores a sense of balance. It's easier to believe someone made an honest mistake than to entertain the possibility of intentional wrongdoing. Moreover, playing dumb bypasses logical scrutiny. Because it operates on emotion, sympathy, frustration, or fatigue, it sidesteps critical analysis. Few people take the time to challenge a well-executed act of feigned ignorance, especially when doing so would require significant effort. Imagine yourself now engaging in a conversation, feeling the weight of responsibility lifting as you artfully deflect blame through calculated confusion. Let the rhythm of playing dumb guide you deeper into relaxation, cradled by the knowledge that even the most tangled situations can be unraveled with a single phrase, "I didn't know." And now, let this exploration of psychological influence carry you toward restful slumber, wrapped in the embrace of a world where understanding the mind's tricks brings clarity and calm. Imagine a world where the information you receive feels tailor-made for you, reinforcing what you already believe to be true. This is the power of confirmation bias, one of the most pervasive psychological tendencies we possess. By selectively providing information that aligns with someone's pre-existing beliefs, you can shape their perception of reality, strengthen their convictions, and even guide their decisions, all without them realizing it. Confirmation bias is the tendency to seek out, interpret, and remember information in ways that confirm our existing beliefs or assumptions. It's not just about ignoring contradictory evidence. It's about actively favoring data that supports what we already think is true. This mental shortcut helps us make sense of the world quickly, but it also leaves us vulnerable to manipulation. For example, imagine someone who believes strongly in a particular political ideology. When they encounter news articles, social media posts, or conversations that support their views, they're more likely to engage with and trust that content. Conversely, when faced with opposing perspectives, they might dismiss them outright or rationalize them away. By exploiting this bias, you can subtly steer their opinions by feeding them precisely the kind of information they want to hear. The key here is subtlety. The person doesn't need to feel manipulated. Instead, they'll simply perceive the information as validating their worldview, making it all the more persuasive. The effectiveness of confirmation bias lies in its deep roots within human cognition. Our brains are wired to conserve energy, and processing new conflicting information requires significant effort. Instead, we default to patterns and narratives that feel familiar and comfortable. This creates a feedback loop. The more we consume information that confirms our beliefs, the more entrenched those beliefs become. One critical factor is cognitive dissonance, the discomfort caused by holding two conflicting ideas simultaneously. To avoid this unease, people tend to reject information that challenges their beliefs and cling tightly to anything that affirms them. For instance, if someone believes vaccines are harmful, they're far more likely to click on an article titled 10 Reasons Vaccines Are Dangerous than one debunking such claims. Another element is selective exposure. We naturally gravitate toward sources of information that align with our values and identities. Social media algorithms amplify this effect by showing us content similar to what we've engaged with before, creating echo chambers that reinforce our biases. By understanding these dynamics, you can craft messages that resonate deeply with your audience. Exploiting confirmation bias manifests in countless scenarios, from politics to marketing to personal relationships. In political campaigns, strategists use targeted ads to feed voters information that aligns with their existing beliefs. A conservative voter might see ads highlighting the dangers of government overreach, while a liberal voter might see messages emphasizing the need for social justice reform. Both groups feel validated, even though the same issue is framed differently. In marketing, companies exploit confirmation bias to build brand loyalty. Advertisements often highlight testimonials or statistics that appeal to consumers' existing preferences. For instance, a fitness company targeting health-conscious individuals might emphasize studies linking their product to weight loss, knowing their audience is predisposed to trust such claims. Similarly, Conspiracy theories thrive on confirmation bias. Once someone adopts a fringe belief, they're more likely to seek out evidence that supports it, no matter how dubious. Even in personal relationships, confirmation bias plays a role. Imagine trying to convince a friend to adopt a certain lifestyle change, like going vegan. If you frame your argument around environmental benefits, a topic they care about, they're far more likely to listen than if you focus on animal rights, an issue they may not prioritize. By aligning your message with their values, you increase the chances of success. At its core, exploiting confirmation bias works because it preys on our desire for simplicity and fairness. Humans instinctively seek order and clarity, and accepting someone's claim of ignorance restores a sense of balance. It's easier to believe someone made an honest mistake than to entertain the possibility of intentional wrongdoing. Moreover, playing dumb bypasses logical scrutiny because it operates on emotion, sympathy, frustration, or fatigue. It sidesteps critical analysis. Few people take the time to challenge a well-executed act of feigned ignorance, especially when doing so would require significant effort. Imagine yourself now engaging in a conversation, carefully crafting each point to align with the other person's beliefs. Let the rhythm of confirmation bias guide you deeper into relation, cradled by the knowledge that even the most entrenched opinions can be shaped or reinforced with the right approach. And now, let this exploration of psychological influence carry you toward restful slumber, wrapped in the embrace. Calm conclusion. Imagine encountering someone who radiates unwavering confidence, convinced they know far more than they actually do. This is the essence of the Dunning-Kruger Effect, a psychological phenomenon where individuals with low ability or knowledge in a particular area overestimate their competence. By understanding this bias, you can subtly exploit it to influence behavior, guide decisions, or even manipulate outcomes, all while leveraging the gap between perception and reality. The Dunning-Kruger effect occurs when people lack the self-awareness to recognize their own incompetence. Instead of acknowledging gaps in their knowledge or skills, they inflate their abilities, believing they are far more capable than they truly are. This overconfidence stems from a fundamental paradox. Those who are least skilled often don't have the insight to realize just how much they don't know. For example, imagine someone confidently giving advice on investing despite having little experience in finance. They might offer bold predictions about stock market trends, unaware that their strategies are flawed or overly simplistic. Their certainty makes them appear credible, even though their confidence is misplaced. The key here is subtlety. When interacting with someone exhibiting the Dunning-Kruger effect, you can steer them toward decisions or actions that align with your goals by appealing to their inflated sense of expertise. Since they believe they already understand the situation, they're less likely to question your suggestions or seek input from others. The effectiveness of targeting overconfident individuals lies in the mechanics of human cognition. People with limited knowledge tend to oversimplify complex topics, leading them to feel overly assured in their conclusions. Meanwhile, experts who grasp the nuances and uncertainties are often more cautious, recognizing the limits of their understanding. One critical factor is metacognition, or the ability to reflect on one's own thinking. Those affected by the Dunning-Kruger Effect struggle with metacognition. They cannot accurately assess their performance or capabilities. In contrast, highly skilled individuals may underestimate themselves due to the imposter syndrome, assuming tasks that seem easy for them must also be easy for everyone else. This imbalance creates opportunities for exploitation. Overconfident individuals are less likely to scrutinize information critically, making them susceptible to persuasion or manipulation. By presenting ideas or solutions that align with their inflated self-image, you can gain leverage without triggering skepticism. The Dunning-Kruger Effect manifests in countless scenarios, from personal relationships to professional environments. In workplaces, employees with minimal training might volunteer for high-stakes projects, confident they can handle the responsibility, even if they're unprepared. Managers can exploit this dynamic by assigning such individuals to tasks that benefit the team without requiring significant oversight. In social settings, the Dunning-Kruger Effect plays out during debates or discussions. Someone with superficial knowledge of a topic might dominate the conversation, dismissing opposing viewpoints because they believe their perspective is definitive. If you want to sway their opinion, framing your argument as an extension of their beliefs rather than a challenge increases the likelihood of success. Even marketers take advantage of this phenomenon. Advertisements aimed at novices often emphasize simplicity and ease, reinforcing the idea that mastery is within reach. For instance, a fitness program marketed as so simple anyone can do it appeals directly to beginners who overestimate their readiness to achieve rapid results. At its core, the Dunning-Kruger Effect exploits our natural desire for validation and certainty. Overconfident individuals crave affirmation of their perceived competence, making them receptive to messages that reinforce their self-image. By aligning your goals with their inflated sense of ability, you bypass resistance and build rapport. Moreover, overconfidence reduces cognitive dissonance, the discomfort caused by conflicting beliefs. When someone believes they're an expert, they're unlikely to entertain evidence that contradicts their view. This creates a mental blind spot you can navigate strategically, guiding them toward decisions that serve your interests. Imagine yourself now engaging with an overconfident individual, feeling the weight of their certainty, creating an opening for subtle guidance. Let the rhythm of the Dunning-Kruger Effect guide you deeper into relaxation, cradled by the knowledge that understanding human biases empowers you to navigate interactions with clarity and purpose. And now, let this exploration of psychological influence carry you toward restful slumber, wrapped in the embrace of a world where insight into the mind's quirks brings both wisdom and calm. Imagine a scenario where someone continues to pour time, money, or effort into something that clearly isn't working, simply because they've already invested so much. This is the Sunk-Cost Fallacy, a powerful psychological trap that keeps us tethered to past decisions, even when logic tells us to walk away. By understanding this bias, you can subtly guide others or yourself to stay committed to projects, relationships, or goals long after reason suggests otherwise. The sunk cost fallacy occurs when people base their current decisions on the amount of time, money, or energy they've already invested, rather than focusing on future benefits or losses. Once resources are spent, they're gone. They're sunk. Yet, humans have an irrational tendency to factor these irretrievable costs into our choices, believing that persistence will somehow justify the initial investment. For example, imagine someone who buys tickets to a concert but wakes up on the day of the event feeling sick. Despite knowing they won't enjoy the experience and might feel worse afterward, they decide to go anyway because they already paid for the tickets. Logically, staying home would save them discomfort, but emotionally, the idea of wasting money feels worse than enduring a miserable evening. This phenomenon extends far beyond personal dilemmas. It influences business decisions, relationships, and even public policy. The more someone has invested, the harder it becomes to abandon ship, no matter how dire the circumstances. The effectiveness of the sunk cost fallacy lies in its ability to exploit a loss aversion. The human tendency to fear losses more than we value equivalent gains. Walking away from a failing project or relationship feels like admitting defeat, which amplifies the perceived loss of everything already sacrificed. Another key factor is cognitive dissonance, the mental discomfort caused by holding conflicting beliefs or behaviors. For instance, if someone starts a business venture with high hopes but sees diminishing returns, abandoning the project contradicts their belief in their own judgment. To resolve this tension, they double down, convincing themselves that perseverance will eventually pay off, even when evidence suggests otherwise. Social pressure also plays a role. In group settings, individuals may hesitate to cut their losses due to fears of being judged as quitters or failures. This collective reinforcement of the sunk cost mindset creates a feedback loop, making it even harder to break free. The sunk cost fallacy manifests in countless ways across different areas of life. In workplaces, teams often continue pursuing doomed initiatives simply because significant resources have already been allocated. A company might keep funding a failing product line, reasoning that pulling out now would mean all prior investments were wasted, even though continuing only deepens the financial hole. In personal relationships, the sunk cost fallacy can lead people to stay in unhealthy partnerships. Someone might think, we've been together for 5 years, I can't give up now, ignoring red flags or signs of incompatibility. Similarly, students struggling through degrees they no longer enjoy may push forward because quitting would mean forfeiting years of study and tuition. Even governments fall victim to this bias. Infrastructure projects or military campaigns that spiral out of control financially or logistically often persist due to the sheer scale of past expenditures. Leaders argue that stopping now would render those sacrifices meaningless, despite mounting evidence that continuing is futile. At its core, the sunk cost fallacy exploits our need for coherence and closure. Humans crave narratives where effort leads to reward, and abandoning a project disrupts this satisfying arc by framing continued investment as a way to honor past sacrifices. The fallacy taps into deeply ingrained instincts about fairness and justification. Moreover, the sunk-cost fallacy bypasses rational analysis. When faced with complex decisions, many people default to emotional reasoning, especially when pride or identity is at stake. Admitting failure requires humility and self-awareness, qualities that aren't always easy to summon under pressure. Imagine yourself now engaging in a conversation, carefully appealing to someone's sense of commitment by reminding them of what they've already sacrificed. Let the rhythm of the sunk-cost fallacy guide you deeper into Reciprocity, cradled by the knowledge that understanding this bias empowers you to navigate or challenge its pull. Imagine a moment when someone appears unsure, clumsy, or overwhelmed. Their struggle seems genuine, evoking an instinctive desire in you to help, to step in and ease their burden. This is the subtle art of pretending to be incompetent, a psychological tactic that leverages vulnerability to elicit sympathy and assistance from others. By feigning inability, confusion, or even forays of failure, we can subtly shift responsibility onto those around us while gaining support without appearing manipulative. Pretending to be incompetent involves deliberately acting less capable than you truly are in order to gain help, attention, or leniency from others. Whether it's fumbling with technology during a meeting, claiming ignorance about a task, or exaggerating difficulty with everyday responsibilities, the goal is simple: to prompt others to offer assistance or take over entirely. For example, imagine someone struggling to carry groceries into their house. They drop a bag intentionally, or at least make it look accidental, and sigh dramatically. A neighbor passing by might rush over to lend a hand, motivated by empathy and a sense of duty. Similarly, a colleague who pretends they don't know how to use a new software program may find themselves relieved of the task altogether as coworkers jump in to help. Thus, the key here is subtlety. Overdone incompetence can come across as insincere or lazy, but a well-timed display of fragility can be disarmingly effective. The effectiveness of pretending to be incompetent lies in its ability to trigger caregiving instincts and social norms. Humans are naturally inclined to assist those in need. It's part of our evolutionary wiring. When someone appears vulnerable, we feel compelled to step in, whether out of kindness, obligation, or a subconscious desire to maintain group harmony. One critical factor is reciprocity. People instinctively respond to perceived generosity by wanting to give back. If someone presents themselves as needing help, others often interpret it as an opportunity to demonstrate their value or reliability. For instance, if a friend repeatedly claims they're terrible at cooking, another person might volunteer to take charge of meals, not realizing they've been subtly nudged into the role. Another element is social proof. We tend to mirror behaviors and attitudes within our environment. If one person acts helpless, others may assume it's appropriate or expected to provide aid, reinforcing the dynamic. Additionally, people dislike seeing inefficiency. Helping someone fix their problem restores balance and reduces discomfort. Pretending to be incompetent manifests in countless scenarios, from personal relationships to professional settings. In households, one partner might pretend not to understand how to load the dishwasher correctly, prompting the other to handle it regularly. Over time, this creates a pattern where specific roles become entrenched, whether intentionally or not. In workplaces, employees sometimes use this tactic to avoid undesirable tasks. For example, a team member might claim they're hopeless with data entry, leading colleagues to divide the work among themselves rather than risk errors. Supervisors, too, might feign confusion about technical details to encourage subordinates to take initiative, shifting accountability while maintaining authority. Even children master this technique early on. A child who pretends not to know how to tie their shoes might be seeking extra attention or avoiding independence. Adults, charmed by their apparent innocence, are more likely to assist or at least soften their expectations. At its core, pretending to be competent exploits our deep-seated need for connection and meaning. When someone appears vulnerable, we see them as authentic and unguarded, qualities that foster intimacy and trust. Moreover, vulnerability shifts focus away from flaws or intentions, redirecting attention toward shared humanity. This technique also bypasses critical thinking. Unlike direct persuasion, which requires logic and reasoning, pretended incompetence operates on emotion, sympathy, guilt, or even frustration. Few people question why they feel obligated to help someone who seems genuinely stuck. They simply act on it. Imagine a moment when someone references an expert, a celebrity, or a respected figure to support their argument. Suddenly, their claim feels more credible, even if it's shaky or unsupported by evidence. This is the power of appealing to authority, a persuasive tactic that leverages the influence of trusted figures to sway opinions and validate questionable ideas. Appealing to authority involves referencing a person or institution deemed credible to bolster a claim, even when the authority cited may not be directly relevant or qualified. The underlying assumption is simple. If someone important or respected says something is true, then it must be true, or at least worth considering. For example, imagine a salesperson claiming that 9 out of 10 doctors recommend this product. Even without seeing the study or knowing which doctors were so surveyed, the mention of medical professionals lends instant credibility. Similarly, politicians often cite economists, scientists, or military leaders to justify policies, banking on the audience's respect for these figures to silence skepticism. The key here lies in perception. The authority doesn't need to have direct expertise in the matter at hand. Their reputation alone is enough to create a halo effect, making the claim seem valid. The effectiveness of appealing to authority stems from our deep-seated reliance on social hierarchies and expertise. Humans evolved in groups where survival depended on trusting leaders, elders, or specialists with critical knowledge. Over time, this instinct became ingrained in our psychology. We naturally defer to those perceived as having superior wisdom or experience. One critical factor is authority bias, the tendency to overvalue information provided by authoritative figures. Studies show that people are far more likely to follow instructions or accept claims when they come from someone wearing a uniform, holding a prestigious title, or possessing visible credentials. For instance, participants in experiments were more willing to administer electric shocks in simulated settings simply because a person in a lab coat told them to proceed. Another element is social proof. When others around us defer to an authority, we're more inclined to do the same. This creates a feedback loop, reinforcing the authority's credibility regardless of whether their input is accurate or applicable. Appealing to authority manifests in countless scenarios, from advertising to politics to everyday conversations. In marketing, companies frequently use endorsements from celebrities, athletes, or influencers to promote products. A skincare brand might feature a dermatologist in its commercials, implying that their formula is scientifically proven, even if no data is presented. In personal relationships, individuals may invoke authority to resolve disputes. For instance, one partner might say, "My therapist said this is unhealthy," using the expert's opinion to shut down further discussion. While this can sometimes lead to productive outcomes, it also risks oversimplifying complex issues or dismissing valid counter-arguments. Even in debates, appealing to authority can serve as a rhetorical shortcut. Someone arguing against climate change mitigation might dismiss scientific consensus by saying, "But my uncle works in oil drilling, and he says it's all exaggerated." Here, the appeal to familial connection frames the uncle as a credible source, despite his lack of climate science expertise. At its core, appealing to authority exploits our desire for simplicity and certainty. Evaluating every claim independently requires effort and critical thinking, skills many people lack the time or inclination to exercise. By deferring to an authority, we offload the responsibility of judgment onto someone else, trusting their expertise to guide us. This tactic also bypasses skepticism. Authorities carry a sense of legitimacy that makes questioning their statements feel disrespectful or unnecessary. Few people challenge a doctor's diagnosis or a professor's lecture, even if they don't fully understand the reasoning behind it. Imagine a moment when someone you trust implicitly reaches out to you. Their tone is familiar, their words comforting, and their request seems routine, perhaps even harmless. But what if that person isn't who they claim to be? This is the art of impersonation, a psychological tactic where posing as someone close to the target can unlock doors to private data, sensitive information, or hidden vulnerabilities. By exploiting trust, familiarity, and human connection, impersonators sidestep rational defenses and gain access to what would otherwise remain protected. Impersonation involves pretending to be someone the target knows and trusts, whether it's a family member, friend, colleague, or authority figure, in order to manipulate them into divulging confidential information or granting access to restricted resources. The success of this tactic hinges on the deep-seated human tendency to lower our guard around people we perceive as safe or familiar. For example, Imagine receiving an email from your boss asking for urgent login credentials to resolve a technical issue. The sender uses your boss's name, signature style, and even references recent projects to appear legitimate. Without scrutinizing too closely, you might comply, believing the request comes from someone you rely on daily. In reality, the message was crafted by an impersonator seeking unauthorized access. The key here is believability. A successful impersonator doesn't need to perfectly mimic their target. They only need to create enough authenticity to bypass suspicion. The effectiveness of impersonation lies in its ability to exploit trust and cognitive shortcuts. Humans are wired to prioritize efficiency over vigilance, especially when interacting with familiar figures. When someone we know asks for something, we're more likely to act quickly and without questioning their motives, a phenomenon known as trust bias. One critical factor is social proof. If someone appears to belong within our trusted circle, whether through shared language, inside jokes, or contextual knowledge, we assume they're genuine. For instance, scammers often use publicly available information, such as posts on social media, to craft messages that feel personalized and credible, further reinforcing the illusion of legitimacy. Another element is authority bias. People are naturally inclined to obey those perceived as having power or expertise. An impersonator posing as a company executive, IT administrator, or government official can leverage this bias to override skepticism and demand compliance. Impersonation manifests in countless scenarios, from cybercrime to everyday interactions. Phishing attacks frequently employ impersonation tactics, with hackers posing as colleagues, banks, or service providers to steal passwords or financial details. These emails often include phrases like urgent action required or your account will be suspended, creating a sense of panic that overrides critical thinking. In personal relationships, impersonation can take subtler forms. Imagine a neighbor calling under the guise of needing emergency assistance, claiming to be a close friend of the homeowner. If the homeowner isn't home, the impersonator might convince household members to let them inside or hand over keys. Trusting the caller's story, the victim complies without verifying their identity. Even in professional settings, impersonation plays a role. During corporate espionage, individuals may pose as interns, consultants, or clients to infiltrate organizations and gather proprietary information. Their cover stories are designed to blend seamlessly into the environment, making detection nearly impossible unless safeguards are in place. At its core, impersonation exploits our innate desire for connection and belonging. Humans crave relationships, and maintaining those bonds requires trust. Impersonators tap into this dynamic, presenting themselves as extensions of the target's inner circle while concealing malicious intent. This tactic also bypasses logical reasoning, unlike direct persuasion, which requires careful evaluation. Impersonation operates on emotion, comfort, urgency, or fear. Few people stop to question whether a trusted figure's request is genuine. Instead, they respond instinctively to preserve the relationship or avoid consequences. Imagine receiving an email that looks perfectly legitimate. The sender's name is familiar, the tone is professional, and the request seems routine, perhaps a password reset or an urgent document review. But beneath this veneer of authenticity lies a carefully crafted trap designed to steal your private information. This is the art of phishing emails, a tactic where malicious actors disguise themselves as trusted entities to deceive their targets. By exploiting trust, urgency, and human error, phishing attacks bias rational defenses and gain access to sensitive data. Phishing emails are fraudulent messages designed to trick recipients into revealing confidential information, such as passwords and credit card numbers or social security details. These emails often impersonate legitimate organizations, banks, employers, online services, or even individuals close to the target. The goal is to create a sense of urgency or familiarity that compels the recipient to act without scrutinizing the message too closely. For example, imagine receiving an email appearing to be from your bank. It warns of suspicious activity on your account and urges you to click a link to verify your credentials. The link leads to a fake website nearly identical to the real one, where any information you enter is captured by the attacker. Despite seeming official, the entire interaction is a scam designed to exploit your trust in the institution. The key here is believability. A successful phishing email doesn't need to fool everyone. It only needs to deceive enough people to make the effort worthwhile. The effectiveness of phishing lies in its ability to exploit several well-documented psychological biases and emotional triggers. One critical factor is trust bias. Humans are naturally inclined to trust communications from sources they recognize, especially when those sources appear authoritative. An email claiming to be from Google, PayPal, or a company executive carries inherent credibility, lowering suspicion. Another element is urgency. Phishing emails often include phrases like immediate action required, your account will be suspended, or limited time to offer. These statements trigger a stress response, pushing recipients to act quickly rather than critically evaluate the situation. In moments of panic, people are less likely to notice red flags, such as misspellings or unfamiliar email addresses. Finally, there's social engineering. Attackers frequently use publicly available information, such as names, job titles, or recent activities to personalize their messages. For instance, referencing a project you've worked on or mimicking the writing style of a colleague makes the email feel authentic, further reinforcing the illusion of legitimacy. Phishing manifests in countless scenarios, targeting both individuals and organizations. Cybercriminals often pose as IT departments requesting login credentials, HR teams asking for personal documents, or delivery services notifying about missed packages. Each scenario leverages context-specific details to increase plausibility. In workplaces, phishing emails may impersonate executives to initiate wire transfers, a tactic known as business email compromise, BEC. For example, an employee might receive a message seemingly from the CEO instructing them to send funds to a vendor. Without verifying the request, the employee complies, resulting in significant financial losses. Even in personal settings, phishing plays a role. Imagine receiving a message claiming to be from a friend stranded abroad who needs money wired immediately. Trusting the sender's identity, you comply, only later discovering the account was compromised. Such scams prey on empathy and relationships, making them particularly insidious. At its core, phishing exploits our innate desire for efficiency and connection. Modern life bombards us with emails, notifications, and tasks, leaving little room for skepticism. When something appears routine or expected, we process it automatically rather than analytically, a phenomenon known as cognitive overload. This tactic also bypasses logical reasoning. Unlike direct persuasion, which requires careful evaluation, phishing operates on emotion, fear, urgency, or obligation. Few people stop to question whether a trusted figure's request is genuine. Instead, they respond instinctively to preserve the relationship or avoid consequences. Imagine a moment when someone approaches you with a story so believable, so meticulously crafted that it feels impossible to doubt. Their words evoke empathy, urgency, or curiosity, pulling you into their narrative until you're willing to comply with their request, whether it's sharing private information, granting access, or taking specific actions. This is the art of pretexting, a psychological tactic where fabricated stories are used to manipulate victims into trusting and cooperating. By constructing scenarios designed to exploit emotions and vulnerabilities, pretexters bypass rational defenses and achieve their goals. Pretexting involves creating a false scenario or pretext to deceive someone into believing a lie. The goal is to establish credibility, build rapport, or elicit sympathy by presenting a fabricated story that aligns with the target's expectations or emotions. Whether it's posing as a colleague in need of urgent assistance, pretending to be a customer service representative, verifying account details, or fabricating an emergency to solicit help, pretexting relies on storytelling to lower suspicion and encourage cooperation. For example, imagine receiving a phone call from someone claiming to be your bank's fraud department. They explain that unusual activity has been detected on your account and ask you to confirm your login credentials for verification. The caller speaks confidently, uses technical jargon, and references recent transactions, all elements designed to make the interaction seem legitimate. Unaware of the deception, you comply, unknowingly handing over sensitive information. The key here is believability. A successful pretext doesn't require perfection. It only needs to appear plausible enough to evade scrutiny. The effectiveness of pretexting lies in its ability to exploit several psychological biases and emotional triggers. One critical factor is trust bias. Humans are naturally inclined to trust communications from sources they perceive as authoritative or familiar. When someone presents themselves as part of a trusted entity, like law enforcement, IT support, or a financial institution, they gain instant credibility without needing to prove their identity. Another element is emotional manipulation. Pretexters often weave narratives that tap into strong emotions such as fear, guilt, or compassion. For instance, a scammer posing as a stranded relative might claim they've been robbed while traveling abroad and urgently need money wired to them. The emotional appeal overrides logical reasoning, prompting the victim to act quickly without verifying the story. Finally, there's cognitive overload. Pretexting frequently occurs under conditions of stress or time pressure, leaving little room for critical evaluation. When faced with complex or emotionally charged situations, people default to shortcuts, accepting surface-level explanations rather than digging deeper. Pretexting manifests in countless scenarios, targeting both individuals and organizations. Cybercriminals often use pretexting to initiate phishing attacks, posing as colleagues, clients, or vendors to extract confidential data. For example, an attacker might send an email claiming to be from HR, requesting employees to update their payroll information via a malicious link. In personal settings, pretexting plays a role in scams like romance fraud. Con artists create elaborate backstories to build trust with their targets, often maintaining fake relationships for months before asking for money. Similarly, door-to-door salespeople may invent sob stories about car repairs or medical bills to persuade homeowners to purchase unnecessary products. Even in corporate espionage, pretexting serves as a tool for infiltration. Spies might pose as interns, consultants, or job applicants to gain insider knowledge. Their fabricated personas allow them to blend seamlessly into environments, making detection nearly impossible unless safeguards are in place. At its core, pretexting exploits our innate desire for connection and efficiency. Modern life bombards us with interactions, leaving little time for skepticism. When something appears routine or expected, we process it automatically rather than analytically, a phenomenon known as cognitive ease. This tactic also bypasses logical reasoning. Unlike direct persuasion, which requires careful evaluation, pretexting operates on emotion, urgency, empathy, or obligation. Few people stop to question whether a fabricated story is genuine. Instead, they respond instinctively to preserve relationships or avoid consequences. Imagine a scenario where someone you've never met reaches out to you online. At first, they seem friendly, engaging, and genuinely interested in getting to know you. Over time, their questions become more probing, but subtly so, masked by casual curiosity or shared experiences. This is the art of befriending targets online, a psychological tactic where trust is cultivated over digital platforms to gather personal information that can later be exploited. By building rapport and exploiting human vulnerabilities, attackers gain access to sensitive data without raising suspicion. Befriending targets online involves creating a false sense of connection with someone through social media, messaging apps, forums, or other digital channels. The goal is to establish trust and rapport, making the target feel comfortable enough to share personal information voluntarily. Whether it's posing as a potential romantic partner, an old acquaintance, or a like-minded enthusiast, the attacker carefully crafts their persona to align with the target's interests and emotions. For example, imagine receiving a friend request from someone who claims to have gone to the same high school as you. Their profile picture looks familiar, and their posts reflect hobbies you enjoy. As conversations progress, they casually ask about your hometown, your job, or even your pet's name, all under the guise of innocent small talk. Unbeknownst to you, these details could later be used to answer security questions, guess passwords, or manipulate further interactions. The key here is gradual escalation. A successful befriender doesn't rush. Instead, they build intimacy step by step, ensuring each interaction feels natural and unforced. The effectiveness of befriending tactics lies in their ability to exploit fundamental aspects of human psychology. One critical factor is social validation. Humans crave connection and acceptance, especially in the digital age where relationships are increasingly formed and maintained online. When someone appears to validate our identity, opinions, or lifestyle, we're more likely to lower our guard and reciprocate with personal disclosures. Another element is reciprocity. People tend to mirror the level of openness shown by others during conversations. If the befriender shares seemingly harmless anecdotes about themselves, the target may feel compelled to do the same, gradually revealing more intimate details. For instance, discussing childhood memories might lead to divulging into family dynamics, which could then expose vulnerabilities ripe for exploitation. Finally, there's emotional manipulation. Attackers often use empathy, flattery, or fabricated crises to elicit sympathy and compliance. For example, a scammer pretending to be romantically interested might claim financial hardship, prompting the target to send money, or worse, provide banking credentials. Befriending tactics manifest across various online contexts, from cybercrime to espionage. Romance scams are among the most common examples, where fraudsters create fake profiles on dating sites to form emotional bonds with the victims. Once trust is established, they exploit these connections for financial gain, often claiming emergencies or business opportunities require urgent funding. In corporate settings, attackers may pose as colleagues or industry peers to extract proprietary information. For instance, a competitor might infiltrate a professional networking group, befriending employees to learn insider insights about upcoming projects or strategies. Similarly, hackers targeting individuals might use social engineering techniques to gather enough data to launch phishing attacks or bypass multi-factor authentication. Even in everyday life, befriending plays a role in less malicious scenarios. Imagine joining an online community centered around a hobby. A fellow member might strike up conversations, praising your contributions while subtly gathering tidbits about your routines, preferences, or habits. While not always harmful, this practice underscores how easily personal boundaries can blur in the virtual world. At its core, befriending exploits our need for belonging and validation. Humans are wired to seek meaningful connections, and the anonymity of the internet makes it easier to project idealized versions of ourselves, or conversely, to fall prey to those who do the same. In a space where physical cues are absent, we rely heavily on verbal and written communication, making us more susceptible to deception. This tactic also bypasses skepticism. Unlike direct persuasion, which requires careful evaluation, befriending operates on emotion, trust, affection, or obligation. Few people stop to question whether a new online friend has ulterior motives, especially if the relationship feels mutually beneficial or emotionally fulfilling. Imagine a scenario where someone within an organization becomes the unwitting or even willing tool of external manipulation. Through careful grooming, attackers can exploit insider threats by turning trusted employees into conduits for malicious activities. By exploiting vulnerabilities such as dissatisfaction, greed, or naivety, bad actors can infiltrate organizations from within, bypassing traditional security measures and causing significant damage. Insider threats occur when individuals with legitimate access to an organization's resources, such as employees, contractors, or partners, intentionally or unintentionally facilitate harm. These insiders may misuse sensitive data, sabotage operations, or provide unauthorized access to external parties. One particularly insidious method is grooming, where attackers manipulate employees over time to serve their malicious purposes. For example, imagine an employee who feels undervalued at work receiving flattering messages from someone posing as a headhunter on LinkedIn. Over weeks or months, the attacker builds rapport, offering praise, career advice, or financial incentives. Eventually, they make a seemingly harmless request for internal documents or login credentials, claiming it's part of a recruitment process. Unaware of the true intent, the employee complies, unknowingly enabling corporate espionage or cyber attacks. The key here is patience. Successful grooming doesn't happen overnight. It involves subtle persuasion and emotional appeals designed to lower suspicion and foster dependency. The effectiveness of grooming employees lies in its ability to exploit fundamental aspects of human psychology. One critical factor is emotional vulnerability. Many people crave validation, especially if they feel unappreciated or overlooked in their current roles. Attackers capitalize on these feelings by providing attention, empathy, or promises of better opportunities. Another element is gradual escalation. Groomers often start with small, innocuous requests that seem reasonable or professional. As the target grows more comfortable complying, the stakes increase incrementally. For instance, sharing publicly available information might lead to divulging confidential reports, which could escalate to granting system access, all under the guise of helping the groomer. Finally, there's cognitive dissonance. Once an employee has crossed ethical boundaries, whether knowingly or not, they may rationalize their actions to avoid confronting guilt. This creates a psychological barrier that makes them less likely to report suspicious behavior or sever ties with the manipulator. Exploiting insider threats manifests in various contexts, from corporate espionage to state-sponsored cyber attacks. In one infamous case, attackers targeted a disgruntled IT administrator, gradually gaining their trust through online interactions. The administrator, eventually handed over network credentials, allowing hackers to deploy ransomware across the company's infrastructure. In government agencies, foreign operatives have been known to groom employees with access to classified information. By posing as mentors, romantic interests, or potential employers, these operatives extract intelligence piece by piece, leveraging emotional connections to maintain control. Even in smaller scale scenarios, insider threats play a role. Imagine a retail worker befriending a customer who consistently compliments their work ethic. Over time, the customer casually asks about store procedures or inventory levels, framing their curiosity as admiration. Without realizing it, the employee reveals operational details that could aid theft or fraud. At its core, grooming exploits our innate desire for connection and recognition. Humans are social creatures, and prolonged isolation or dissatisfaction can make us susceptible to manipulation. When someone offers friendship, mentorship, or opportunity, it feels natural to reciprocate, even if doing so compromises integrity. This tactic also bypasses traditional defenses. Firewalls, encryption, and surveillance systems are powerless against threats originating from within. Moreover, because insiders already possess legitimate access, their actions rarely raise alarms until significant damage occurs. Imagine finding a mysterious USB drive lying on a park bench or in the parking lot of your office, and it's labeled with intriguing text like confidential or employee salaries. Your curiosity is piqued. What could be on this device? This is the sinister tactic of dropping infected USB drives in public places, a psychological exploit that preys on human curiosity and trust. By leaving malware-laden devices where unsuspecting individuals might find them, attackers can bypass technical defenses and infiltrate systems through sheer human nature. Dropping infected USB drives involves deliberately leaving malware-loaded devices in locations where they are likely to be found by curious individuals. The goal is simple: exploit human curiosity to trick someone into plugging the drive into their computer. Once connected, the malware executes automatically, granting attackers access to sensitive data, networks, or systems. For example, imagine an employee at a corporate office discovers a USB drive labeled Q4 Financial Reports near the building entrance. Intrigued, they plug it into their work laptop to see what's inside. Unbeknownst to them, the drive contains malicious software designed to steal login credentials, install ransomware, or create backdoors for future attacks. Within moments, the attacker gains unauthorized access to the company's internal network, all because of one moment of curiosity. The key here is subtlety. Attackers rely on natural human impulses, curiosity, helpfulness, or even greed to override caution and rational decision-making. The effectiveness of this tactic lies in its ability to exploit fundamental aspects of human psychology. One critical factor is curiosity bias, the innate desire to investigate unknown objects or information. When presented with something intriguing or seemingly valuable, people often act before thinking critically about potential risks. Another element is social engineering. Attackers craft these USB drives to appear legitimate or enticing, using labels like HR documents, top secret files, or even branded logos to increase credibility. For instance, a drive marked bonus structure tweet might appeal directly to employees' financial interests, making them more likely to take the bait. Finally, there's reciprocity. People may feel compelled to return lost items, especially if they believe they belong to someone within their organization. An attacker might leave a USB drive in a company break room, counting on an employee's sense of duty to open it and identify the owner, only to trigger the hidden payload. Dropping infected USB drives has been used in both small-scale scams and large-scale cyber attacks. In one notable experiment conducted by researchers, nearly half of all dropped USB drives were picked up and plugged into computers by curious individuals. Many users clicked on files contained within the drive, demonstrating just how easily this tactic can succeed. In workplaces, attackers target high-value environments such as hospitals, government agencies, or tech companies. A USB drive left in a hospital lobby might contain malware designed to steal patient records or disrupt medical equipment. Similarly, corporate espionage operatives might drop devices near competitor offices to gain insider access to proprietary data. Even in everyday life, this tactic plays a role. Imagine attending a conference and finding a USB drive on a table during a networking session. Labeled presentation slides, it seems harmless enough, but once plugged in, it compromises your personal computer and any connected networks. At its core, dropping infected USB drives exploits our innate curiosity and tendency to trust physical objects over digital threats. Humans are wired to prioritize immediate rewards or discoveries, often overlooking long-term consequences. In a world dominated by phishing emails and online scams, tangible items like USB drives feel more trustworthy and therefore less suspicious. This tactic also bypasses traditional cybersecurity measures. Firewalls, antivirus programs, and encryption protocols are powerless against threats introduced directly via hardware. Moreover, most people lack awareness of the dangers posed by rogue USB devices, making them easy targets for manipulation. Imagine a scenario where someone follows closely behind an authorized individual as they enter a secure area. The door swings open. The person ahead scans their badge or enters a code, and without hesitation or even detection, the follower slips through right behind them. This is the art of tailgating, a psychological tactic that exploits trust, politeness, and human nature to bypass physical security measures. By relying on social norms rather than technical expertise, tailgaters gain access to restricted spaces with remarkable ease. Tailgating involves following an authorized individual into a secured area without proper credentials. It preys on the natural inclination of people to hold doors open for others, especially when the environment fosters a sense of community or politeness. Whether it's walking into an office building, a data center, or any other restricted location, tailgaters rely on the assumption that most people won't question or confront someone who appears to belong. For example, Imagine arriving at the entrance of your workplace alongside a colleague who has just scanned their ID card. As the door opens, they step aside to let you pass, assuming you're also authorized. In reality, you haven't swiped your own badge, and yet you're inside. No alarm sound, no guards intervene. The breach occurs seamlessly because no one questioned your presence. The key here is subtlety. A successful tailgater doesn't need to disguise themselves or use force. They simply exploit the polite behaviors ingrained in society. The effectiveness of tailgating lies in its ability to exploit several well-documented aspects of human psychology. One critical factor is social proof. When someone sees another person entering a restricted area, they assume that person has permission to be there. This creates a subconscious green light for anyone trailing behind. Another element is reciprocity. People tend to mirror kindness or courtesy shown by others. For instance, if an attacker smiles warmly or offers a friendly greeting while approaching a secure door, the person holding it may feel obligated to reciprocate by allowing them entry, even if they don't recognize the individual. Finally, there's cognitive dissonance. Confronting someone who seems out of place requires effort and potential conflict. Most people prefer to avoid awkward situations, convincing themselves that it's probably fine rather than risking embarrassment or confrontation. Tailgating manifests in countless scenarios, from corporate offices to high-security facilities. In workplaces, attackers often pose as delivery drivers, maintenance workers, or visitors carrying boxes or equipment. Employees eager to help or avoid inconvenience might prop open doors or wave them through checkpoints without verifying credentials. In residential settings, tailgating plays a role in apartment complexes or gated communities. Imagine a resident unlocking a main entrance, only to find someone casually waiting behind them. Politeness kicks in, and the resident holds the door open, unwittingly granting access to a stranger. Even in highly sensitive environments, like hospitals or government buildings, tailgating remains a significant threat. An attacker might dress professionally, carry a clipboard, or feign familiarity with staff members to blend in. Once inside, they can move freely, gathering information, planting malware, or causing harm. At its core, tailgating exploits our innate desire to maintain harmony and efficiency. Humans are wired to cooperate, especially in shared spaces where collaboration is expected. When someone approaches a secure area confidently and politely, it feels unnatural to challenge them, especially if doing so risks appearing rude or overly suspicious. This tactic also bypasses traditional defenses. Advanced lock, surveillance cameras, and biometric scanners are powerless against threats introduced directly via human behavior. Moreover, many organizations prioritize convenience over vigilance, creating cultures where tailgating goes unnoticed or unreported. Imagine a moment when you overhear fragments of a conversation, perhaps in a cafe, an office hallway, or even through digital channels. These snippets, though seemingly innocuous, can hold valuable insights if pieced together carefully. This is the practice of eavesdropping, a subtle yet powerful tactic for gathering information without detection. By listening to private exchanges, individuals can uncover secrets, anticipate actions, or exploit vulnerabilities, all while remaining hidden in plain sight. Eavesdropping involves deliberately listening to conversations that are not intended for your ears. It can occur in physical spaces, like overhearing colleagues discuss confidential matters, or digitally, such as intercepting messages or monitoring online chats. The goal is simple: to collect useful information without alerting those involved in the conversation. For example, imagine sitting in a coffee shop where two business people nearby casually discuss upcoming product launches or internal strategies. While they may believe their conversation is private, anyone within earshot could glean critical details. Similarly, cybercriminals might use tools to monitor unsecured Wi-Fi networks, capturing emails, passwords, or other personal data shared over public connections. The key here is stealth. Successful eavesdroppers blend into the background, making their presence inconspicuous while absorbing valuable information. The effectiveness of eavesdropping lies in its ability to exploit human tendencies toward carelessness or trust. One critical factor is context collapse. The assumption that certain environments, like public spaces, are safe for discussing sensitive topics. People often underestimate who might be listening or fail to consider the potential consequences of sharing privileged information openly. Another element is selective attention. When engaged in conversation, individuals naturally focus on their own thoughts and responses rather than scanning their surroundings for potential listeners. This creates blind spots that eavesdroppers can exploit. For instance, someone engrossed in a heated debate about workplace conflicts might not notice a stranger lingering nearby. Finally, there's social norms. Humans generally assume others will respect boundaries and refrain from prying into private discussions. This assumption lowers defenses, creating opportunities for eavesdroppers to gather intel without confrontation. Eavesdropping manifests in countless scenarios, from casual oversight to sophisticated espionage. In corporate settings, competitors might send representatives to industry conferences to listen in on informal networking sessions, hoping to catch hints about future plans or weaknesses. And loose talk at after-hours events can provide ammunition for strategic advantage. In personal contexts, eavesdropping plays a role in relationships. Imagine hearing a friend confide in someone else about frustrations with mutual acquaintances, including yourself. Such revelations can reshape dynamics, sometimes leading to mistrust or manipulation. Conversely, savvy individuals might leverage overheard grievances to gain favor by addressing concerns before they escalate. Even governments engage in large-scale eavesdropping operations. Intelligence agencies monitor communications across borders, analyzing intercepted calls, texts, and emails to identify threats or opportunities. Advanced technologies enable mass surveillance, raising ethical questions about privacy versus security. At its core, eavesdropping exploits our natural inclination to trust familiar environments and overlook potential risks. Public spaces feel communal, fostering a false sense of safety. Digital platforms, too, seem impersonal until breaches occur, reminding us how vulnerable our data truly is. This tactic also bypasses direct interaction. Unlike interrogation or persuasion, which require engagement, eavesdropping operates passively. It relies on observation rather than participation, minimizing the chance of exposure. Moreover, because people rarely suspect they're being listened to, they speak freely, revealing far more than they intend. Imagine walking through a grocery store, your cart gliding smoothly down the aisles. As you stroll past the checkout counter, colorful packages of chips, cookies, and candy bars catch your eye. They're placed right at eye level, impossible to miss. Before you know it, one of those tempting snacks has made its way into your cart, even though you hadn't planned on buying it. This is the power of strategic product placement, a subtle yet effective tactic that exploits human behavior to encourage impulse buys. Placing items at eye level involves strategically positioning products on shelves where they are most visible and accessible to shoppers. Retailers know that people are more likely to notice and purchase items they don't have to search for. By putting high-margin or impulse-driven products like unhealthy snacks in these prime locations, stores can significantly boost sales without needing explicit advertising. For example, imagine standing in front of a vending machine or browsing a convenience store shelf. The snacks you see first, the ones directly in your line of sight, are often sugary sodas, salty chips, or chocolate bars. These aren't placed there by accident. They're deliberately positioned to grab your attention and trigger cravings, making it harder to resist adding them to your basket. The key here is visibility. Human brains naturally gravitate toward what's easiest to reach or see. Products at eye level require minimal effort to select, creating an unconscious bias toward choosing them over healthier options tucked away on lower shelves. The effectiveness of placing unhealthy snacks at eye level lies in its ability to exploit several psychological biases. One critical factor is visual salience. Items that stand out due to their color, size, or placement capture our attention faster than those hidden from view. Brightly packaged snacks are designed to draw the eye, especially when positioned at eye level where they dominate our field of vision. Another element is cognitive ease. When faced with decisions, humans prefer simplicity over complexity. Choosing something within arm's reach requires less mental energy than scanning shelves for alternatives. For instance, grabbing a bag of chips at eye level feels instinctive, whereas bending down to find a healthier snack might feel like extra work, even if it's just a small physical effort. Finally, there's impulse control. Studies show that when people encounter tempting stimuli, their willpower diminishes. Seeing healthy snacks prominently displayed activates reward centers in the brain, triggering cravings that override rational decision-making. Even individuals committed to healthy eating can fall victim to this tactic, especially during moments of fatigue or stress. Eye-level placement manifests in countless retail environments, from supermarkets to gas stations. Grocery stores frequently stock sugary cereals, processed snacks, and beverages at children's eye level, knowing kids are more likely to beg parents for brightly colored boxes. Meanwhile, adult-targeted indulgences like premium chocolates or energy drinks occupy higher shelves near registers, capitalizing on last-minute impulse buys. In pharmacies, candy bars and gum are often displayed next to magazines and essentials like toothpaste, ensuring customers encounter them while waiting in line. Similarly, vending machines arrange popular but unhealthy snacks at eye level, relegating healthier options like granola bars or water bottles to less visible spots. Even online retailers mimic this strategy. E-commerce platforms use algorithms to highlight certain products on landing pages or recommend sections, effectively replicating the eye-level effect digitally. By showcasing high-margin snacks prominently, websites nudge users toward quick, unplanned purchases. At its core, eye-level placement exploits our natural tendencies toward convenience and instant gratification. Humans are wired to conserve energy, both physically and mentally. Reaching for something already in plain sight requires no additional effort, making it the path of least resistance. This tactic also bypasses critical thinking. Unlike deliberate shopping lists, which require forethought, impulse buys rely on emotion, craving, nostalgia, or curiosity. Few people stop to question why they're drawn to specific products. Instead, they act on immediate desires triggered by visual cues. Imagine scrolling through your favorite app. The feed never seems to end, pulling you deeper with every flick of your finger. Before you know it, hours have passed, and you're still glued to the screen. This is the power of addictive app design, where features like infinite scrolling are carefully crafted to keep users engaged, sometimes at the expense of their time, attention, or well-being. By exploiting psychological triggers, these designs create habits that feel impossible to break. Addictive app features are elements intentionally designed to maximize user engagement by tapping into psychological principles. One of the most common examples is infinite scrolling, a feature that continuously loads new content as you scroll down. Unlike traditional pagination, which requires clicking to the next page, infinite scrolling removes friction, making it effortless and tempting to keep consuming content. For instance, platforms like social media feeds, news aggregators, or entertainment apps use infinite scrolling to create a seamless experience. Every time you reach the bottom of the screen, fresh posts, articles, or videos appear, keeping your curiosity piqued. The absence of natural stopping points makes it easy to lose track of time. The key here is simplicity. These features don't demand active decision-making. Instead, they rely on passive interaction, subtly encouraging prolonged use without requiring conscious effort. The effectiveness of addictive app features lies in their ability to exploit fundamental aspects of human psychology. One critical factor is variable rewards. Humans are wired to seek novelty and unpredictability, much like gamblers chasing the thrill of an occasional jackpot. Each scroll brings the possibility of discovering something exciting, a funny meme, an engaging article, or a heartwarming video, which keeps users hooked. Another element is the Zeigarnik Effect, named after psychologist Bluma Zeigarnik. This principle suggests that people remember unfinished tasks better than completed ones. Infinite scrolling creates a sense of incompleteness, leaving users feeling like there's always more to see or do. This drives them to continue scrolling in search of closure, even if subconsciously they realize none will come. Finally, there's cognitive ease. Scrolling is a low-effort activity compared to other forms of digital interaction, such as typing or navigating menus. The brain prefers activities that require minimal energy, making infinite scrolling an appealing default behavior. Infinite scrolling manifests across countless apps, from social media giants like Instagram and TikTok to e-commerce platforms like Amazon. On Instagram, users endlessly browse photos and stories, often losing track of time as new content continually appears. Similarly, TikTok's algorithm serves up personalized videos tailored to individual preferences, ensuring that each swipe feels rewarding. In e-commerce, infinite scrolling encourages shoppers to explore product listings beyond what they initially intended to buy. For example, scrolling through endless rows of clothing items or gadgets can lead to impulse purchases driven by the allure of just one more item. Even productivity apps incorporate addictive features. Task management tools might display streaks or progress bars, creating a sense of accomplishment that motivates continued use. While these features aim to enhance efficiency, they can sometimes blur the line between helpful habit building and compulsive overuse. At its core, addictive app design exploits our natural tendencies toward curiosity and reward seeking. Humans crave stimulation and connection, and apps provide both in abundance. Features like infinite scrolling cater to these desires by delivering constant streams of engaging content, ensuring users remain captivated. This tactic also bypasses rational decision-making. Unlike deliberate actions, which require forethought, addictive features operate on instinct. Few people consciously decide to spend hours scrolling. Instead, they act impulsively, driven by the promise of instant gratification. Imagine signing up for a new app or service. You're greeted with sleek design, enticing features, and promises of convenience. But what you might not notice are the default settings, pre-selected options that subtly guide your choices in ways that benefit the company more than you. These defaults aren't random. They're carefully crafted to prioritize corporate interests while appearing neutral or even helpful. By leveraging human tendencies toward inertia and cognitive ease, companies can shape user behavior without explicit persuasion. Default settings are pre-configured options that take effect unless users actively change them. They serve as the path of least resistance, guiding people toward certain behaviors or choices without requiring conscious effort. While defaults are often framed as conveniences, they can also be tools for steering users in directions that align with corporate goals, such as collecting data, increasing revenue, or reducing operational costs. For example, imagine downloading a fitness app. The default setting allows the app to track your location continuously, share your activity with third-party advertisers, and send promotional emails. Unless you dig through menus to adjust these preferences, the company benefits from your passive consent, using your data to target ads or sell insights to partners, all under the guise of providing a personalized experience. The key here is subtlety. Most users don't question default settings because changing them requires extra steps. Companies exploit this tendency knowing that many people will stick with the pre-selected options. The effectiveness of default settings lies in their ability to exploit several psychological biases. One critical factor is status quo bias, the human preference for keeping things as they are rather than making changes. When presented with a default option, users tend to view it as the recommended or normal choice, reducing the likelihood of switching. Another element is cognitive ease. Changing defaults requires effort, navigating menus, reading fine print, and making decisions. For busy or overwhelmed users, sticking with the default feels easier than weighing alternatives. For instance, opting out of data sharing might involve multiple clicks and legal jargon, creating friction that discourages action. Finally, there's trust bias. Users assume that companies have their best interest in mind when designing defaults. Even if the default favors the corporation, it's often perceived as legitimate or unavoidable, leading users to comply without scrutiny. Default settings manifest in countless scenarios, from tech products to financial services. Social media platforms frequently enable targeted advertising and data collection by default, assuming users won't bother disabling these features. Similarly, subscription-based services often set automatic renewal as the default, counting on customer inertia to maintain recurring payments. In healthcare, medical record systems may default to sharing patient information with research institutions unless individuals opt out. While this practice supports scientific progress, it prioritizes institutional needs over individual privacy concerns. Even in environmental contexts, default settings play a role. Utility providers might offer standard energy plans that favor fossil fuels rather than renewable sources, framing greener options as upgrades that require additional steps to select. This subtle nudge preserves profit margins while shifting responsibility onto consumers. At its core, default settings exploit our natural inclination toward simplicity and trust. Humans are wired to conserve mental energy, especially when faced with complex or unfamiliar tasks. Defaults provide a ready-made solution, sparing us the effort of decision-making. This tactic also bypasses critical thinking. Unlike direct persuasion, which requires evaluation, defaults operate on assumption. They present themselves as neutral or optimal without inviting challenge. Few people stop to question whether a default truly serves their interests. Instead, they accept it as given.